Hello ladies, how's everybody doing tonight? Man, it has been a rough couple weeks for me. So we're going to be talking tonight about core control. We're going to be talking about pelvic control, how it kind of moves for our posterior pelvic tilt. We're going to talk about what that actually is, and then also neutral spine and supporting your back through that. So a little recap on me, and I'm going to be moving a little bit slower in this Facebook Live, is I had appendectomy surgery where I had my appendix removed, not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before. So tomorrow evening or night, it will be 2 weeks. So I'm going to be moving a little bit slower, but this is actually some of the things that I need to be doing for rehab and for starting to get my core to start working again. And you're going to see me doing some support stuff in here to support my stomach and abdominal area because my abs are they're piecing out on me through things. So I'm going to be waking them up a little bit more in this, and you're going to see my hand kind of supporting a little bit through my abdomen and my belly to support my abs through that, or even doing some really easier versions of things through it. So I hope that you guys are excited. I hope that y'all are stoked about it. Who knows what posterior pelvic tilt is or has done some stuff where they have really focused in on this movement pattern. I was talking to a client yesterday actually, and about base movements. This is a base movement pattern so you can squat correctly. This is a base movement pattern so you can hip hinge correctly. This is a base movement pattern so you can deadlift correctly. It's also a base movement pattern for going downhill, for able to use your glutes better. All of these things come down to certain base movements that you should be able to do and should be able to know if your body is doing them correctly. That's some of the key points within this is, do you know what your body is doing? Do you understand that? So let's lay on our back first. I'm gonna get my buns down there. Through it. And so what we're going to be doing here is I want your hands to be on your stomach or one hand underneath kind of the small of your back through this. And if you can, just follow along with the video. I'd love for you to follow it along and see what your body feels as you do these things. And so as our knees are up, our pelvis is a nice even stance. Usually we have a little bit of space in between the small of our back and the floor, and we're pretty naturally relaxed through here. You may feel some hip tightness. That may be something you need to work on through that. But let's do this. So you're going to take a deep breath in. As you breathe in, your stomach should fill up with air, aka your diaphragm comes down because its natural resting state is up like this. And so as you breathe in, your diaphragm goes down to help you expand your lungs, but that means that your belly will come out. So we're just going to do a couple reps of this. So belly comes out when we inhale and just exhale naturally. Belly goes out. We kind of breathe out through a little bit of a smaller space in our mouth for this exercise componentry here. And I don't know if you see my hand rising and falling. And so now with this rep, as we breathe out, I'm going to tilt my pelvis back and I'm going to press my small of my back into the floor. And you should feel more abdominal muscles kicking in through here. Now we're not trying to go for 110% like max contraction here. We're going nice and easy. And so that's where also sometimes if we're lacking core stability, core control, if we try to do 110%, we may not actually use our core muscles because our brain goes, well, those guys aren't strong enough and I don't know how to use them properly. So I'm just going to use my butt through this. Or I'm actually going to even use my back through this and try to make that happen, which is complete backwards thinking of our brain, because if we use our back muscles, then we're going to arch our back more, right? Right? So it's going to make that space underneath here even bigger whenever we activate our back muscles, because when you activate something, it gets shorter, right? Well, as I activate my front abdominal muscles and round my body back, I'm doing a posterior pelvic tilt. So if I look at my pelvis, I'm tipping the top of it, that's more towards my ribs, backwards, aka posterior, backwards tilt through it. As we activate our back muscles, now we're tilting it forwards. We have an anterior pelvic tilt or front pelvic tilt. And so understanding this movement pattern through here and using your breath with it, now you feel it activating all the way across and not just centrally through here. And so that's how we're integrating our obliques with our main like six-pack muscle, our rectus abdominis, with this movement pattern. This is super key and critical because as we think about supporting our back with other abdominal muscles, other core exercises that we need to, our obliques are some of the main muscles that we need to target. The six-pack muscle, it's important for sure, but these oblique ones are the main gig because they actually wrap around and attach to part of our back called the thoracolumbar fascia and form kind of a corset around our body, which supports our back and our trunk as a whole through that. And so we're going to be talking about that later on as well. And so just understanding this movement. Is anybody doing this with me? I'd love to know if you are. So just doing this with me, to making sure you're tilting that pelvis back, feeling that core, more so even the lowermost part of your core. This is, honestly, y'all, this is hard for me with being 2 weeks or just shy of 2 weeks out from surgery. Like I feel it over here. And so sometimes this is where you need to start as your base. So we're gonna transition now onto our hands and knees. So now let's go on our hands and knees. So you understand that posterior pelvic tilt. You understand how we need our obliques to actually kick in with that. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to be on our hands and knees. This is a different sort of gravity effect. So before, gravity is working with our core, right? We didn't need our back muscles at all because it was going into the floor. We didn't need to arch our back. We wanted to move the opposite way of doing that tilt. And so you can see me doing that tilt here in this like kind of low kneeling, almost sitting position through here. So now we're going to move into a hands and knees position. I'm going to be pretty butt back since it makes it a little bit less that I have to do for it. What we're going to do, we're just going to allow our back to sag. Now we're doing that anterior pelvic tilt, right? We're tipping this part forward. And then we're going to use our core, same movement that we just did, to do posterior pelvic tilt. We're just going to kind of go back and forth through here. I call this a bee stinger. And so if you had a bee stinger sticking off your ass, you're going to point that bee stinger down to the ground and you're going to relax it and let it point up. The key is that I'm not moving my upper back with this. I'm just moving my pelvis. And so it's a separate movement. And so we're understanding what's happening to our lumbar spine, our low back, and also to our pelvis within this movement pattern. Understanding this now helps us understand what neutral spine is. And so neutral spine is where I'm at right now. It's a nice flat back position, maybe even slightly sagged through that. And it's where I'm using a little bit of control from the front to keep me in this position. Now, the next step is that we target this movement pattern. We can do some shoulder taps through here that make our core work a little bit more to hold this position. You also might feel if you're in more of my position through here, backed up, or you can do it more stretched out through here, which is what I'd rather you do. I just can't, my core can't do that much through that, is that now you have to use more core as you stretch out farther. As you move more into a plank, you have to hold this more. This is why it's super important for when you're on the bike and you're going downhill, that you're understanding how to use here with that pelvis control, with the lower ab control, your core control, and how things meet together to support your back and load your hips through it. This is the base movement of a lot of different things. So as you're doing that, you can understand how different things, especially as you're doing your shoulder taps, if you let it sag too much through here, I'm going to support with my hand through that. So if you let it sag too much, now and then you try to do your shoulder taps on top of that, then you're going to be using a little bit more of your back muscles for that. Versus if I come up just a bit, now I'm holding with my core. I can do this a little bit more now because I've warmed up. Got my brain to body muscles working for me, which is nice. And now I can feel my core working, that full part of that front part here, working with my back muscles, and it feels supported through my back muscles through it. Because it's a co-contraction and support from the bottom to help with the top. This is how we gain that support for our low back. This is how we integrate. Like, y'all, this is very base, but it's very important that if you don't understand it, and a lot of my clients don't understand that pelvis control. So whenever you're going to go squat and you hyperextend your back and you just stick your butt out to make that squat happen, you need to posterior pelvic tilt, hold a little bit more with your core, and that's that movement of here to make sure you're not in this position as you're doing your squat. I would demonstrate that, but I can't do that. I can't do that quite yet. And so that's how you apply this knowledge to so many other different aspects. But if you don't practice this base movement, if you don't understand it, to keep that pelvis in control, that core control for it, then you're not going to be able to apply it. There's so many clients that once they start to understand this, and I'm not talking about just PT clients, I'm talking about all my one-on-one fitness clients, and then also the ones that go through core crushers, that go through some of my programs online. They start understanding how their body is moving, and that's the key part. If you've had low back pain, if you've had hip pain, they call it lumbopelvic dysfunction or disassociation. We lose where we are in space of what's happening. And so people don't realize that as they're going into that squat, they are hyperextending. They just feel low back stress and they feel a ton more of their quads and they feel no glute activation at all. Now, yes, in squats, you're going to use more of your quads, but it's that things are combining. What you feel needs to equal the result that you want. That's the key. Are you feeling these things that you want to have happen, or do we need to change some things in your base movements like this, your core control? And this is why I'm starting here as my rehab. So I'm starting here as I'm getting things back. It's because this is base things that my brain needs to come back to here and be like, I know that them things got cut on, but I still need you to work. I still need this to be my main gig of how I come back and how I gain strength again. And so if you're feeling those other aspects, if you're not able to do your deadlifts without hurting your back, this is a base movement pattern for you. Understanding this and then applying it is key. And those are like why you do different exercises to challenge that application of it and go through other different steps that are in some of my programs of exercises and movement patterns. I go a little bit into that in the challenge as well. So I hope this was super helpful for you. Again, we just did it on the back. We used our breath. You can also use your breath as you're on your hands and knees. Understanding that same base movement, that breath out as you're doing that posterior pelvic tilt or that tipping of that top part backwards. That can help you integrate your brain to body kick to help you actually apply it. I hope y'all have a fantastic night. If you're on the team, I look forward to talking about some punchy climbs and long hill climbs later on tonight. Have a good night, y'all. And I hope this was helpful for you. It was good for me to start doing a little bit of stuff. Bye, y'all.